Welcome back to another episode of the Next Level Minds podcast. My name is Chris Chapman, and I am your host, and this is a podcast that is dedicated to those who want to reach a next level in their business, personal, or career life. The way in which we help do that is by speaking with entrepreneurs, movers and shakers in their industry, and really walking through how they got from point A to point B and overcame various setbacks, adversities, failures along the way. Because I don't know about y'all, but I always look at successful people and say, okay, how did they actually build this life? This podcast, Next Level Minds, really walks through that. We also host solo episodes called Motivation Monday, where I personally talk about a wide range of personal development related topics that could be goal setting, could be habits, could be finances, could be anything and everything under the sun, personal development related. That's what today's episode is going to be, a Motivation Monday episode. But before we dive into this week's episode, I just want to reiterate my main goal with this podcast. If you've been listening for a while, you know that it is to impact over 1 million people by helping them reach a next level in the areas that matter most: faith, family, fitness, finances, and American freedoms. So if you have not done this already, please take the time to subscribe to Next Level Minds on Apple Podcast. Share this episode with a family member, friend, or colleague who you think will get some value out of it. And leave a review of Next Level Minds on Apple Podcast or YouTube, or really wherever you listen to podcasts. Let me know what you think of the episode. Now on to today's episode, which, as mentioned previously, is part of my Motivation Monday series. I'm going to be talking about the 5 Fs. Now, what are the 5 Fs? I just alluded to it in the introduction. The 5 Fs are faith, family, fitness, finances, and American freedoms. And unfortunately, we live in a time right now where people are soft, distracted, and disconnected from what actually matters, right? These 5 Fs, faith, family, fitness, finances, and American freedoms, they're not just buzzwords thrown out there to sound fancy, right? They're the framework for living a life that's purpose-driven, right? Resilient and untouchable. They're not just buzzwords, right? They're a framework of how you can live your life. And the reason why I have this podcast, and the reason why I talk about the 5 Fs a lot, and the reason why I just released a newsletter called the Next Level Minds newsletter that we launched in 2024, that we come out on a monthly basis talking about the 5 Fs. The reason that I launched that is because of some very sad and scary statistics that I'm about to read off here. And some of these statistics, and you can look these up, but 29% of U.S. adults have been diagnosed with depression at some point in their lives. About 20% of U.S. adults are currently experiencing or being treated for depression. Anxiety disorders are at an all-time high. Divorce rates are right at about 50%, if not slightly over. The U.S., unfortunately, is experiencing some of the highest obesity rates ever, with over 40% of Americans being classified as obese. That number will continue to climb year after year after year if we stay on the current trajectory and trends that we're on. Happiness and life satisfaction is at the lowest that it has ever been. Over half of America right now is living paycheck to paycheck. Almost 70% of people have less than $1,000 in their bank account. Values are at an all-time low. Having children is at an all-time low. Community involvement is at an all-time low. Patriotism, pride in this country is at an all-time low. Christianity, unfortunately, is at an all-time low, right? So these are very sad statistics. And one of the reasons why I started the podcast, and one of the reasons why I recently started the newsletter, is to help combat some of these statistics. Every time I bring up some of these statistics, and I can't speak to all of them verbatim, right? But I have a few of these memorized, and every time I start talking about this with people will tend to ask me, okay, well, Chris, why do you think that is, right? Well, a couple reasons being, I think people overall have dropped their standards. I think people have stopped investing back into themselves from a personal development standpoint. I think people have lost focus on what matters. Being too obsessed with the things that don't, like reality TV shows, like social media, like fake news, just filling their mind with things that don't matter. People have stopped letting a deeper purpose and mission drive them. And people have really bought into the false message portrayed by the media and others that it's okay to be average. It's okay to be overweight. It's okay to be broke. It's okay to not be happy. It's okay to have an average life, right? And that could not be further from the truth, right? So many people have unfortunately just bought into this, lie that we've been told that like, oh, well, you're overweight, whatever. You're like most people. Oh, you're broke? Well, that's like most people. Oh, divorce? Oh, well, 50% get divorced anyway. You don't really have many values? Well, neither does anybody else, right? Oh, you don't take pride in your country? Well, not a lot of people do anyway, right? Like, bought into this false message that it's okay to dive deep into these things. And that could not be further from the truth, guys. I was at the airport the other day. I was waiting for a flight. And, when I wait for a flight, sometimes I scroll on my phone, sometimes I read. But I was waiting for this flight, and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to be present and in the moment. And I was sitting there waiting, and I just kept watching people walk by. And it was person after person after person was just overweight, balding. You could tell that they were stressed out. You could just tell that they were in this, like, funk, right? And I started thinking like, is that person that just walked by, are they really living their like best ideal life? And I just started asking myself that for each person, right? Boom, 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 boom. And I just was like, man, I haven't really found anybody, right? And I'm not trying to be judgmental, right? But like just looking at a quick glance of like, okay, these people that I keep seeing walk by, which unfortunately was the majority of the people, they weren't holding a high standard for their life, right? Like when I see somebody who is fit, who's just got their stuff together, like you can tell a difference, right? You can tell how they carry themselves. You can tell how they dress. You can tell how they walk into a room, right? And these people just didn't have that, right? And I started thinking like, man, like this is sad. This is really sad to watch. I'll also talk to people sometimes as well. And, unfortunately, it just seems like a lot of people aren't fulfilled and they just aren't bought into a bigger mission for their life, right? And I firmly believe that we have an obligation to be the best version of yourself that you can possibly be, right? Honoring those that came before you, right? Family members, friends, people who've sacrificed their lives for this great country, and then setting an example and inspiring the people that are in front of you, right? People younger than you, and setting that example of what life could look like if you live life by a high standard and if you focus on the areas of that matter. There's an author Brooks. He's a famous author, and he mentions a study that shows that happiness comes from having faith, family, community, and a fulfilling occupation, right? So it's pretty interesting that faith, family, community, and a fulfilling occupation. They've done studies, okay, where does happiness come from? And that's what they've found, right? And I like to focus on the 5 F's because the 5 S, faith, family, fitness, finances, and American freedoms, they help you have the right foundation, right? And most people have their foundation tied up in the wrong things, right? Most people have their foundation tied up in material things. Most people have their foundation tied up in reality TV and social media and what others think of them. Most people have their foundation tied up in things that aren't going to matter or things that do not matter, right? Most people don't have standards. Most people don't invest back in themselves. Most people don't have a deeper mission and purpose. But if you're listening to this podcast, I'm sure you believe that you have an obligation to be the best possible version of yourself and honor those that came before you and inspire those that are in front of you. Again, I want to break down these 5 F's, and I can share more in depth about each one, and then I can also share a tip for each one as well. So starting with faith, I'm a Christian. I believe in God. Jesus has saved my life. He's the creator of the universe, salvation. I've dove a lot deeper, especially the last 2 years with all this, actually 3 or 4 years, especially with all this crazy nonsense going on in the world. I've definitely dove deeper into my faith, and Matthew 11:28 says, Jesus, come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest, right? Rest from the things that I mentioned above, like rest from the anxiety, rest from the depression, rest from the stress, kind of rhymes, rest from any fears that you have, right? And the other reason why I love that verse is because it coincides pretty nicely with Isaiah 41:13, where it says, "For I, the Lord your God, hold your right hand. It is I who say to you, fear not, I am the one that helps you." And faith is an extremely big foundation of my life because, again, come to me all who are weary and I will give you rest. And then knowing that what Isaiah just mentioned, that you have somebody to go to and help with your fears, help with your stress, right? We live in a hopeless world, but you can find hope in faith. And I also think it's important to have some guiding principles, right? And for me personally, I use the Bible as those guiding principles. I've looked for them elsewhere in, careers and various things. And I personally have found, right, that these are some great guiding principles to live by, right? And if this is something that you want to dive deeper into, I'm personally not big on like boiling the ocean and trying to do a million things at once. A simple tip is just like pop open the Bible app in the morning and be like, you know what? I'm gonna read this for like 1 minute while I'm still in bed, and I'm gonna fill up my day with this verse that pops up, and it's gonna be how I'm gonna start the day on a firm foundation like that. Moving on to family. Family is really, your why, right? Personally, I think if you're winning in business but losing at home, then you're ultimately losing, right? I think it's very important to invest into this just like anything else. And trust me, I found myself at times being so busy that I'm like, dang, I haven't gone on a date in like a week and a half. I haven't called my parents in like 2 or 3 weeks, or I haven't caught up with people that matter most to me, right? And so trust me, because I have a ton going on. Like, it's easy to get overwhelmed, but I have found that it's just as important, if not more important, to invest into these areas just like anything else, right? And so, that could look like date nights with your wife, or just having some conversations about, what matters most. I don't have kids yet, so I don't want to speak on this topic because I personally don't like speaking on topics that I don't have experience in. But really the only thing I will add here is that I think it's extremely important to be a living, breathing example of what a life with high standards looks like to your family, especially if you have kids. For the men out there, especially if you have a wife, like, it is your job to be the provider, the protector, the caregiver. It is your job to set the vision and lead the household, right? And the best way to lead your household is if your cup is filled and you have a life of high standards and you're the best version of yourself and you're leaning on the right principles and foundations. And so, especially if you're the man of the household, like, this job of having a life of high standards and excellence and being the best should be more important than ever. Tip here for family is just, if you're in a relationship, weekly date night, right? Doesn't have to be anything crazy. It could be, getting a glass of wine for an hour, or it could be going on a walk and, getting ice cream somewhere. It could be going to the movies. Like, it doesn't have to be like a $400 dinner with a bottle of wine and cocktail, steak, all this stuff. Like, it could be just something where you're actually investing a lot of time. Onto the fitness category, I personally believe that being physically fit is the ultimate sign of self-respect, right? It shows that you're driven and disciplined. It shows that you actually care about yourself. It shows that you live a life of high standards. It shows that you have just a strong level of focus. It's a great way to set an example. And being physically fit is literally one of the only things in life from a success standpoint that 100% cannot be given to you. Like, you can have wealth handed down to you. You could have a career handed to you. You could have a business handed to you from an inheritance process, right? But like, physically fit, yes, some people have better genetics than others and things like that. But like, even if you have good genetics, like, you're not naturally just going to be like physically really fit, right? And so when I see somebody who's physically fit, I ultimately think, okay, this person's disciplined, they're driven, they have a life of high standards, they have a good level of focus, and it instantly makes me want to just get to know this person more, because I'm like, wow, if they're physically fit, like, they're like-minded individuals who have the same values, the same morals. They get it, right? And I think a tip here is, if you're not really into fitness, is start small, right? Going back to what I mentioned earlier, you don't have to boil the ocean. And that could just look like a daily walk. For the month of January, in addition to my lifting routine and running routine, like, I'm doing an outdoor walk every single day, right? And I can already tell just from doing a daily outdoor walk, and yes, I already do like lifting and running and all that, but I can tell with adding this daily walk to the routine, even if it's like 10, 15 minutes during lunch, my mood has increased, my energy has increased. Like, I've dropped like 1%, or I'm not 1% body fat. I've dropped 1% of my body fat. Not that I really needed to do that, right? But like, I mean, it's been like, recording this on January 14th. It's been like 2 weeks, right? And I can already tell an example, or I can already tell a difference. Next, I want to move on to finances. What I love about finances is that, in addition to the fitness side of things, like, it's a kind of a telltale sign that you can show others what's possible with hard work, dedication, and commitment. I was, this is like a year and a half ago, I was meeting up with one of my buddies who's probably about like 15, maybe like 10 years older than me. And he's got a super nice Mercedes. Like, this thing is at least $100,000, if not more than that. And, we met up. This might have been like 2 years ago. But anyway, we met up, and I've always looked up to this guy just because of the success and the life that he's built. And, we met up, saw him pull up in the parking lot, and he had just bought this car. And I was like, man, like, that's a super nice car, blah, blah, blah. And we just got to talking about it. And like, just him rolling up in that really nice car was like, dang, like, this is what hard work, dedication, commitment, all these things, this is what it can get you if you're consistent on that, right? And that's one of the things that drives me, is like being financially successful and showing others what's possible. Because like, I didn't really come from much, right? Like, I grew up in a fantastic household, loved my parents to death. We always had a roof over our head, never had to worry about like food not being on the table, right? But at the same time, like, we didn't really take any family vacations. I paid for pretty much the majority of my whole first car, worked during high school, worked during college, worked during summers, went door to door when I was like 12 years old, just trying to get extra money. Like, it was a great upbringing, right? But like, we just didn't have a ton of money. And just thinking about like what the combination of commitment, hard work, dedication has brought from like graduating high school 10 years ago to like being extremely broke, to then going to college and graduating college and having like, in 2018 when I graduated, having like a couple $1,000s in credit card debt, maybe like $500 cash to my name, to now having a very impressive net worth, a great retirement account, to 2 houses, a very nice house in Charleston, a rental property in Charlotte, a very nice, impressive high salary that I've worked my butt off to continue to grow, a growing podcast that's listened to in 52 different countries, a newsletter that people subscribe to and read, a personal brand on LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram. And I mean, to me, I've accomplished a lot, but in the grand scheme of like my 15-20 year vision, I'm just scratching the surface, right? I was talking to a buddy the other day, and they're like, man, like, I'm so proud of all the great things you've done. I'm like, yeah, like, I'm proud too, because a lot has happened in the last like 5 years, and a lot more has happened in the last 10 years. But I'm excited for the next like 10, 15, 20 years where I'm sitting in like the waterfront house with a nice pool, massive back porch, drinking a expensive glass of whiskey, overlooking the view. Like that's the vision that I visualize every day, is like sitting in like a $5 or $10 million house with my family, and just thinking about like, dang, like we've worked extremely hard for this and it's been worth it, right? And so I think from the finances side, like going back to that scary stat above, 70% of Americans have less than $1,000 in their bank account. Credit card debt is at an all-time high, right? Like, be the complete opposite, right? Like, be the opposite of those statistics. People are in credit card debt, don't be in credit card debt. People don't have an emergency fund, get an emergency fund. People don't have retirement, get retirement, right? And success from a financial standpoint especially is just a combination of executing on the right habits with the right level of consistency for the right amount of time with a strong belief system, right? Like when you first get started, nobody's going to believe in you. You have to believe in yourself first, have to execute on the right habits, have to have the right level of consistency, and you have to know that it's going to take time. My biggest tip here with finances, and we have a whole episode about this if you just keep scrolling down, but increase your income every year by investing back into yourself, growing your skills, growing your, repertoire, if you will, of knowledge, and then using that to increase your income, right? Like becoming the best version of you will get you more money. I'm in sales, so there is more control over that. But if you're not in sales and you're kind of in like a fixed salary position, still go out and be the best version of you that you can possibly be. Then you'll have some weight to then create a business case to your boss as to why you need more money and frankly why you deserve more money. Because if you lock in with your faith, your family, your fitness, right, your financial habits, and just your habits in general, walk back into your boss's office like January 14th is when we're recording. So if you do this for an entire year straight, walk into your boss's office and say, look, I've become the best version of myself by doing this, and this. And this helped me do this in my career where I accomplished this, and this. And again, majority of people are average, so you're going to stick out. The chances that you'll get an increase in salary is going to be significantly higher if you lock in with the right habits. If you want to know more about finances and increasing your income, there's a lot of Motivation Monday episodes on this, by the way, so feel free to jump out of this one when it's over and jump into some of those. But the last thing I'll touch on here is American freedoms, right? I think it's extremely important to embrace the freedoms that this amazing country has and promote the freedoms that this amazing country has, right? Like, I hate seeing people ashamed to live in this amazing country. I personally say, if you don't like it here, then there's multiple other countries you can move to. Like, what's stopping you? If you're going to hate on your own country, then why are you living here, right? And I talk to people from different countries all the time. Like, I have some buddies from Venezuela. I've talked to some people that I know from Europe and like that live here in America now. And they're like, man, this is literally like the best country ever. Like, I don't know why people are bad mouthing it, right? And it's super interesting to see people of their own nationality talk bad about their own country, but then you meet somebody who moved here and became a citizen here like 3 or 4 years ago, and they're like, man, like, so blessed to be here, this is the best country ever, blah, blah. And I'm like, let's bring that pride and that patriotism for our own American people, right? And it's very important to stand tall, right? Like, be proud of this amazing country, but more importantly, set the example for others by being a living example of what it means to be a proud American with high standards, with a great loving family, with a high income, with your finances in check, with your physical attributes in check, with your mental attributes in check as well, right? Like, fitness just isn't physical fitness. It's also mental fitness as well. Like, be a living, breathing example of what it means to be an American with high standards, right? And that's something that really drives me, is setting the example for others and then helping people see, okay, here's what a life of hard work and discipline and habits can do for you. And inspiring people to get better, to say, you know what, like, I see Chris running around the block, see Chris walking during lunch. I see Chris getting back from the gym at like 6:30 in the morning. That means he had to leave at 5:15, blah, blah, blah. Like, man, like, he's looking great. Man, like, look at this house. Look at what he's done. Look at this, look at this, look at this. And like, inspiring people to live that life as well. Like, when I see somebody who's successful, I instantly get more inspired to be like, you know what? I want a similar life as well. Like, if this person did it, I can do it too, right? I have that alarm in my phone that says if somebody else built the life I want, I can do it too, right? Like, I want people to look at my life and say, if Chris can do it, I can do it too. But that starts with me being the best version of myself and setting the example for others around me, right? And that's why I started the Next Level Minds newsletter, which, by the way, if you want to sign up and subscribe and join many others who are very invested into their personal development, the link will be in the show notes of the episode. But I started this newsletter to positively influence and impact the culture that we live in. And I think now is more important than ever to be able to impact the culture that you live in, right? And there's multiple ways that you can do that. You don't have to start a newsletter. You don't have to start a podcast. You can simply do this by just being a living, breathing example of what it means to be somebody who's committed to the right habits, the right routines, the right behaviors, and ultimately the right vision for their life, right? And I think a lot of times people get too caught up in a list or things that they would do. It's like, no, just invest into the right habits, right? And again, for me, I started this newsletter because I think we're just seeing a decline in leadership. I think we're seeing an attack on high standards. I think we're losing, the values that really once held us together as a nation. People are becoming disconnected. They're dropping their standards. They're lacking their true direction. We don't have to accept this, right? Like, we can reclaim the important values of faith, family, fitness, finances, and American freedoms, right? And these are the pillars that can build a strong, vibrant society, a society and a culture that lifts each other up, one that stands up for what is wrong, one that takes pride in this great nation of America. And together, we can inspire each other to set a higher standard and lead a life with integrity, lead a life with purpose, lead a life with a strong mission, right? And this community with Next Level Minds, like, we're not just talking about these values. We're living them out every day, right? We're building a community and fostering a community that challenges the things that I listed at the start of the episode, the low standards in life, right? And we're championing for personal growth, right? And I want to thank you guys for tuning in and listening, not just to this episode, but to all the other episodes as well, right? Like, I want to thank you for the support. There's millions and millions of other podcasts you could be listening to. There's millions of other personal development style brands and people you could follow. And if you're listening to this and you follow me on the other social media avenues, LinkedIn, Instagram, you're signed up for the newsletter, like, I just want to give you guys a big thank you because it means a lot. I'm pouring a lot into this personally to grow this. And every time I see new listeners and new followers, it really just pumps me up. So again, thanks for listening to the show. Thanks for diving into this episode particularly. Let's start the week strong and let's continue to live a life of high standards and set the example for others of what a true high standard living American, pro-freedom, pro-finances, pro-faith, pro-family really looks like. It's up to you to change the culture. It's up to you to impact the culture. And it's up to you to set the example for those around you. Let's have a great week.